All right, Chris, we are live. It's Friday.
What?
What are you thinking?
It, I am excited to be here. Happy Friday, Jay. Uh, I'm excited for the show. We got a lot of interesting things to talk about. We're kicking off a brand new little series of our own, so I'm pretty stoked for that. And so this should be a good one. So to those folks out there that are new to the show, welcome to On the Rocks, the show where we talk about accounting and accounting adjacent stuff, mostly as it relates to e-commerce, but not only. I'm Chris Gino, and wrong way. He's Jay Kindelman, and one day I'll get good at that. One day I'll get good at this. It's the wrong direction. Last week
How
we
much
talked
of your podcast cocktail have you already had this afternoon, Chris?
like two swallows, man. That's the, so I'm on the right. It doesn't matter. Yeah, you're that way to me, but you're
Right,
that way in the
right.
whatever. Last week we talked about metrics related to your business. We talked about our favorite metrics, how to get the underlying data, and potential problems that you can run into evaluating inputs. This week, like I mentioned, we're going to start a several-part series related to starting an e-commerce business. This series, yeah. This series will touch on the finer and far-reaching points of running an e-commerce business, such as building your brand and improving and optimizing your website, and it'll span on to operations and growth strategies. But before we get to that, what happened this week? There looks like the Department of Justice is gonna make some big changes. There's some. I don't know if it's I don't really know exactly how this works. I don't know if it's legislation or if it's some other stuff. But it sounds like marijuana is going to move down from being a Schedule 1 drug to maybe all the way down to Schedule 3, which is a pretty big change. And normally that wouldn't be all that relevant. Except that there's like loads and loads and loads of tax impacts related to what that means. So I don't know all of those, Jay. What kind of tax impacts are we talking about here? What does being transferred from a Schedule 1 drug to a Schedule 3 drug? What's that mean?
So basically, what I read is, other than the tax impact, it doesn't have much impact anywhere else, because
Ah,
it is still a controlled substance. It's still could be illegal, but think of it like a Tylenol with codeine or Oxy or something like
mm,
those items. So
yeah,
Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 are completely illegal, and when it comes to tax, 280E applies to Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 drugs, and 280E is the tax consequences of operating an illegal operation, where your ordinary expenses are not deductible. The only thing deductible at that point is your cost of goods sold. So that's why we have these cannabis shops that are selling this product, and they're making a lot of money, but they're paying an exorbitant amount of tax because all those expenses to operate that business are not deductible because it is considered an illegal empire or enterprise. So
yeah,
this change is going to make a huge impact to cannabis shops, because this will allow them to deduct the marketing expenses, deduct the rent, deduct the salaries. It's
yeah,
going to change the landscape for tax for cannabis producers and sellers throughout the U.S.
yeah.
Now, it's still going to be, and there's a fine line, because you can now expense it, but in certain aspects it's still illegal, and we still have the fight between the states and the federal government as to legality. So,
Sure.
once this happens and we have more details, we'll dive a little deeper into it. But top level, this is really good for cannabis producers and sellers, because
Yeah.
they're going to see, I don't want to call it a windfall, but they're going to have a major change to the tax structure that they've been operating under since cannabis became legal in Colorado.
Yeah, that's a huge thing and super exciting. One of the things that I have a lot of interest in is what kind of expectations do you think we should have in the marketplace? Is this going to mean that there are more cannabis facilities, or because they can now operate a little bit more profitably, or are we going to get better quality, or are we going to get worse quality because maybe some clowns get in there? Like what? Any thoughts on what'll happen in the marketplace?
I am not a cannabis operation expert, but from what
Yeah.
I've learned from those around us at High Rock that work in that space, that since it's not made completely legal, it shouldn't have that major impact to what we're seeing today. We might see more players want to get into it because they're going to be able to keep more of their profits in their pockets. But when it
Right.
comes to the product, it's not going to, what's the term? It's not deflate the value of it, but like normalize the product where, this producer has this amazing product that they're selling at $25 a pound, and this one's selling it at $5 a pound. And if it becomes legal, the fear is those values will kind of come together. It'll all come
Sure.
down to the lower level. Whereas where it remains right now with it not being legal, just not Schedule 3, just not Schedule 1, I believe it might just stay kind of the same at the moment. So we shall see.
Yeah, no, that'll be an interesting thing to follow too. Obviously, that hasn't happened yet. It's just been a thing that's been floated as a consideration. I don't think the Department of Justice or whoever has actually made that change. And again, I don't know if that's something that requires legislation to like actually impact change, or if that's something that the Department of Justice can just do on its own. So that'll be certainly an interesting thing to follow up on. Speaking
Most
of
definitely.
interesting things to follow up on, it sounds like the IRS is going to step up their following up on people that are super wealthy and trying to avoid taxes. So it sounds like the IRS is looking to step up some of its enforcement. I know what is his name? Danny Werfel, is that his name?
Danny
I can never
Werfel.
remember. Yeah, I can never remember his name. But
And I will
get
put
it
that
right every time.
qualifier back out there, not the former Gator quarterback. It's a different Danny Werfel.
Different Danny Werfel. But he did some talking, and one of the outputs was that there was going to be this step up in enforcement. Do you want to talk more about that, Jay?
Yeah, most definitely. So this week, the IRS put out their 2024 strategic plan. We're going to touch on just this one part of it. There was so much more of it that was released, and we'll get into some of that next week. But for this right now, they're looking at stepping up enforcement on the wealthy because they feel they are the ones that are not paying their taxes that are due, and they're underreporting. And so as part of their strategic plan going into 2025 and 2026, they plan on increasing the audits from a rate of 11% to 16.5% on those earning over $400,000 a year. So that's, it's a fairly large, it's 50%. It seems bigger than it really is. It's going up 5%, but at that low level, it makes a big deal. Now, I did take some numbers down here, and what did I do with it? You know what? I messed with my numbers here. So, right now we have over a $600 billion tax gap. That is taxes that are owed versus taxes that are paid. And a good part of that tax gap, $77 billion, is due to non-filers. 77 billion. So it's about 12 to 14%. The largest part of that, 540, and this is estimates from the IRS, is from individuals underreporting their taxes. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of underreporting, if you ask me.
Yeah, what would it have to be? Like 5x that, probably?
Right. And maybe this is why we're having the new 1099 DA we talked about last week.
Yeah, maybe
because that might be what's throwing that up there.
Trying to capture some of this income, right?
Yeah. And and if you do the math, the other part, it's about approximately $60 billion that is underpaid. Underpaid, where they've might have made their estimates, but they never made that final payment. So, the IRS is still looking to bring in those new IRS agents to, clear this AR up. And that's what it
Yep.
is to the United States government. It's their AR. Clear it up,
Well,
and they're not coming after Chris
yeah.
and Jay who have a W-2 and
No.
file a 1040 and pay their taxes. They're going after those people that aren't filing and are, underinflating their revenue. So,
Yeah.
we shall see again. But I'm looking forward to diving a little deeper into that strategic plan next week and talking about that because, and I don't know if this is on here or not, but I mean, part of this story is, we have a working call at work every day, and I started it today, and I named it Flashback Friday because this week I've been flashing back to the IRS days of old. It's like I cannot get through. I'm getting that message that the call volume is too high. Please call back later or tomorrow. Same thing with Colorado, mind you. I'm calling Colorado to fix an issue, and same thing. You get that same message and clunk, they just hang up on you. So up until now, at least since January, I've had really good luck calling the IRS. Didn't matter if it was at 7, at 8, at 9 a.m. Eastern. They were answering and getting through in 2 to 4 minutes. And today, this week, it's been out this week. It's like, my first call this morning was 30 to 60 minute wait. And unfortunately, I had a call in 30 minutes. So by the time they would have answered, I would have had
Already would have been gone anyway. Yeah.
So I let that go. But it's that investment, and that's all part of their strategic plan. And we'll dive into that a little bit later next week.
Yeah, no, that'll be good to see because I wonder if, or it kind of seems like that maybe the IRS front-loaded some seasonal help or something like that, maybe where they brought a lot of folks in from January to April when they were expecting higher call volumes potentially, and now in May, or maybe everyone in the IRS is taking their 3-week vacation right now. Who
Maybe,
knows?
Maybe.
Could be.
Getting ready for extension season.
Yeah. One other piece of news that I saw that I don't know if it would ever make the news really, but because I feel like this happens every once in a while, but the SEC shut down an audit firm, like absolutely just shuttered them because they were doing really, really, really lousy audits. The name of the firm was Borgers. I think I have no idea how to say that, so hopefully I'm close at least. And their claim to fame is that they love to do small and small and mid cap startup type entities. And one of those happened to be Trump Media, so that's the reason why their name even made the news. I think is because they were the ones that issued the going concern opinion that we talked about a few weeks ago.
Interesting,
or at least I believe they were. And certainly they definitely were involved in some way. But yeah, now they won't be next time because the SEC just shut them down. So it was interesting to read that because I hadn't heard. I know that the SEC has a lot of enforcement power, but I'd never heard of them actually just shuttering an entire audit practice. Fines, penalties, like that stuff's pretty ordinary. And there were plenty of those. I think I saw it was 14 million in fines between the lead partner and the firm itself. So I mean that's a pretty substantial fine anyway. But I hadn't seen much about them actually just shuttering audit practices. So that's pretty wild to me. So so it was an interesting story. Jay, I when we were talking earlier this week, it sounds like you this week you also had some like health insurance issues or some challenges around that. Like, do you want to talk more about that this week, or we want to take it up some other time?
You know what? Let's take that up next week. Let's see what happens in the next week with the situations going on. So
yeah,
for sure.
Sounds good. We can talk about that next time. I haven't paid attention this week, but any news from Capitol Hill? Any progress? I know there was actually some conversation about actually trying to do some stuff a couple weeks ago, but I haven't seen anything more. Are we still stuck?
Haven't seen anything come out of that. And last we talked about TikTok. It's facing a ban. They're like, we're gonna shut it down before we sell it. So, yeah.
Oh, did they say that?
They've said that, yeah.
Wow.
So it's gonna be a
That'll
fun
be interesting
fight.
to keep watching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Between TikTok, between new tax rules, between the legalization of marijuana, we got all kinds of like fun stuff happening. And all just coupled together with IRS step up enforcement. Let's go! It's gonna be fun times over the next few months.
Most
We'll
definitely.
we will see what else happened this week, Jay, that we missed. Anything come to mind? Anything of note?
I'm rolling through my mind here. I can't think of anything of major importance that has happened.
Yes. It's all right. It's all right.
Yeah.
Well, before we get on, I today particles collide. I don't recall. Have I had a Manhattan or a Manhattan
I don't
project
believe
here
so.
already? This is Manhattan Project. It's local here in Dallas. They have all the names of these things that are all like one of them is Hoppenheimer, and they have like a I don't know something with a bomb in it or something. They got all kinds of different fun named beers. But this one is a
Nice.
hazy IPA, and so I was super interested in trying that one today. So I did, and then if I get through that one, I thought it was appropriate given my
Yeah.
excitement for eclipses
There you go.
to have the Black Hole Sun, which is by 903 up out of Sherman. They would have enjoyed the eclipse here as well. Maybe, probably just barely though, but they would have at least got to enjoy it. And it looks like they made a beer about it, or at least we're excited about it too. So I saw that one. It's a black lager, which I should enjoy too. And it's kind of a beer that I like. So I'm pretty stoked to give that one a try if I get to it.
Very cool.
And if I don't get to it here, I'm gonna get to it later today. So we'll see how it goes. Jay, I know you're busy there. So what's in your cup? Water today?
I actually
What do we got?
have bourbon and Pepsi today. We are out of Coke, and I have an
no.
audience outside my door. As you know,
Yeah.
Chris, my daughter
Yeah.
Abigail will not come in my office when I'm on camera.
Yeah, this one is published too, so she should probably definitely stay off today.
She's
This one's
laughing out there
live
right
to
now.
the masses.
Yes.
Stay away, Abby. Stay away. All right, so that brings up an interesting question for me, Jay. Is it a Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper? Or like, what's the order here?
I almost went with Sprite because I do not like Pepsi at all.
Ooh, big Sprite guy.
I prefer Coke,
Yeah.
and you go somewhere and they're like, oh, we have Pepsi. You got Dr. Pepper? Yeah, I'll take that. So
There
Dr.
you go.
Pepper's
So
number
Coke-
two. Coke,
Coke,
Dr.
DP.
Pepper. Yep.
Yeah, I haven't had any of those in quite a many moons, but I used to be a Dr. Pepper guy. Now, if I'm mixing my whiskey with anything at all, it'll be Sprite if I have the choice, or 7-Up. One of those. I don't really care. They're pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
And so
I was
7-Up
really
is
weighing it. I don't know. I mean, something just about the color.
Yeah, it's a little
It just
darker.
feels right.
I didn't realize it was darker like that. That's crazy. All right, well,
Yeah.
enjoy that, and a few of them if you need to. Yeah, Christy, a lot of people do. There's a reason why you call it Coke when you're having a soda, because a lot of people prefer Coca-Cola.
And that's a great debate to get into too. I mean, why do we call it Coke? I mean, you're drinking an Orange Crush somewhere and you call it a Coke.
Man,
No,
some
it's
people do,
Orange.
but not me,
It's Orange
man.
Crush.
It's soda to me.
It's soda. Exactly.
It's soda.
Yeah.
And in Texas, that's probably like blasphemy. So don't tell my neighbors. but it's a soda, and there shall be no debate about it. That's what it is. You can call it soda pop if you really want to get aggressive.
Well, that's kind of like the whole accountant debate in Texas. Can you call your business an accounting firm, or call yourself an accountant in Texas? That's that's a fine line, kind of like calling it soda pop. So.
Yeah, if you're a firm, you got to like put your name in there and everything.
Yeah.
Here, like you gotta really mean it.
Yeah.
So that is an interesting thing. Okay, so that I'm really looking forward to drinking this. One day I would love to be able to like couple with somebody to like brew my own beer and make some super dope product. Right? I've got this great idea.
Go.
Brewing beer, genius. Now I've got some like sweet stuff to sell, and I want to like give it to people around the world. I want to share this joy that I've found, right? Whatever, beer I made. Maybe beer is not the best example for this, but whatever. whatever widget that I've made. It's an awesome widget. I want to share that to the world because I know that there's going to be other people out there that love that exact same thing. But I don't know anything about that. I don't know what to do. So where do you start? What should you do? The good news is that's what we're here to talk about today and over the next few episodes, so that we can talk about the things that matter. We're going to start that by introducing the concept of e-commerce. What that actually means. We're going to talk through what different types of e-commerce businesses are and what ones exist. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of starting an e-commerce business. And then we're going to talk about some key steps that you should take when you're starting your e-commerce business. So let's get into it. Jay, tell me, what's e-commerce to you?
E-commerce to me is when I pick up my phone or go on my browser and I order something, and next thing you know, 2 days later, it shows up at your door.
Yeah, that's the Amazon style of e-commerce.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, that's Shopify. That it covers most of.
That's true. You can get a lot of different things quickly. That's true, right? Yeah. And so I think the literal definition is commerce that's electronic.
Yep.
Super basic, right? But that's like what you're talking about, through your computer, through your telephone, without having to go into a retail store. This is the electronic version of commerce, right? I don't know a lot about the history of e-commerce. I feel like it's been around for most of my adult life, but it's obviously grown a whole lot. Jay, do you can you back in my day me?
Well, back in my day, I mean, for me, I built my first e-commerce site in the late 90s.
Okay.
I had a family member who was running I guess you'd call it a packaging company in New York. They mostly made gift bags and boxes and things along those lines.
Packaging.
And I built them their first website, first product website where they could actually sell product online.
Okay.
Now, granted, it did not have... They weren't as sophisticated. They didn't want to charge credit cards for it. They just wanted it to take the orders and then bill it through their normal system. So,
sure.
I was able to... And I talked about this, I think, yesterday on my other show with Tam. I was talking about, taking something and then reverse engineering it. So I found a website and I was able to break down the pages, and I was able to figure out what was being done behind the scenes. And this is where I learned my first ASP pages. I don't know if you know what that is, but that was basically Microsoft's version of the HTML and
okay.
So active server pages is what they were.
Oh, okay.
So I was able to connect the web page and the database and the web server to an Access database behind the scenes.
Oh yeah, all right.
So based on calls to the database, it pulled up your product and allowed you to put it in a shopping cart, and next thing you know, you click submit.
You built Shopify before it even existed, Jay. You missed your chance.
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah, so obviously that type of commerce became much more popular around that same time. Actually, I think in my mind I always think about 2002. I think it was when there was the .com boom. .com was just e-commerce, right? It's pets.com because pets can't drive, right? I remember that very much, and I remember them being one of the casualties of that time period. Like anybody was doing anything to sell stuff online, but they didn't do some of the stuff that we're talking about today, where they were trying to grow too fast or spending too much money, and that didn't have the capital and the funding to be able to continue. So that 2002 bust really slowed down e-commerce for a few years for sure, and then it started to pick back up, right? And so I think once Amazon got a foothold and a stranglehold into the shipping space, that started to really accelerate e-commerce generally about the same time, probably around the same time that Shopify really started getting kicked up and giving you this good backbone for your website that allowed anybody to be able to sell those things. And then it just continued. And then, of course, when the pandemic happened and throughout a lot of the United States, people got locked down. E-commerce became kind of your only option for a while, and so as a result, like e-commerce really, really sprung up during that time, and now you see it everywhere. E-commerce is I don't know how it compares. I probably should have looked up some stats. I don't know how it compares to like traditional retail, but I would be shocked if it's not like really close or well past. Jay, do you know any of the stats there?
I'm trying to remember that, and actually, I believe it's still behind retail, but not far.
Mm. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, it's huge, right?
Yeah.
And like we talked about, right? It's easy, and that's one of the pros of it, right? Your customer doesn't have to leave their computer to be able to enjoy the value of your product.
I mean,
so
you look at the Amazon model, like you said. For me, it's like I just go to my front door and there's 3 packages there. It's like every day. It's like, who ordered this? Oh, I did. I said, okay, what is it? I don't know, but it looked cute. Okay, whatever. It's all good. So,
whatever it is, be it. The advertising for the win, whatever on that product,
right,
for sure.
Exactly. And I don't know if we talked about my daughter's prom experience a couple of weeks ago and the picture taking, but the 5-inch heel she got came from Amazon.
And so I guess I didn't really think about that much, but that feels like the discretionary spending is where a lot of e-commerce happens. Like, it's not all of it though, and in fact there are a whole wide variety of ways that you can e-commerce, right? You can e-commerce as a B2C entity, right? Amazon, Walmart, Etsy, even you could just buy things directly from Etsy that way, right? That's a business to a consumer. There's also like business to business. Like, people don't really think about that a lot, but e-commerce has come a long way there. Where Grainger, I think, is a great example of this, of businesses selling to businesses, because I think I could probably go buy something on Grainger.com. I mean, I've definitely heard their ads, but they're making their hay by selling a mass of products electronically to their customers, right? You can also have customer to customer commerce, which is a relatively new kind of e-commerce. This is eBay. Like, eBay's been around for a while, but Facebook Marketplace is a consumer to consumer. Craigslist is consumer to consumer. Like, this is a very it's a little more rudimentary, right? It's a little bit less predictable, because the consumer is the consumer is the person who's in control, and so because of that, you end up with it's not quite as pretty all the time, right? You get the like hazy picture of the bicycle on Facebook Marketplace or something like that. It's maybe not the best. I definitely am guilty of that. I put a really, really bad picture of a dresser on Facebook Marketplace once to try to sell it. My wife was like, "What are you doing? You gotta get this out of here."
And there are many times where that consumer to consumer sale generates a new business, because you go through there. It's like, hey, I'm selling everything in my garage that I haven't touched in 2 years. Next thing you know, it's like, hey, this is nice. I like this, and they do what's called like retail arbitrage.
Oh, I
They'll
love
go
it.
to the Walmart, go to the Target, and buy everything that's on sale for $1.
Yeah.
And then they'll throw it up on Amazon and sell it there for $10, and they might make $2 on it, but that's how they get bit.
Absolutely, and there's loads of different things that are like this, right? I feel like the trading card market, or like the whatever you would call that, playing card, like both like. I had a friend who had done this with Magic the Gathering cards. Like, he was always scouting eBay for like underpriced stuff and then buying it and then reselling it. And so that arbitrage opportunity makes it really fun, right? And so that does mean that you get you can potentially get much better deals because the consumer doesn't always know the value of what they're selling. They're just estimating it. Like you said, the dude's cleaning out his garage. He's like, man, I got to get rid of this. What did I buy it for? Oh, I don't remember. Let's just sell it for $50. When it's really like a $200 mower or something. Like, there's a lot of opportunity there. There are some other sites. The consumer to business also happens. Like, this doesn't happen quite as much, but something like crowdsourcing or freelancing, like those types of things are individuals trying to sell to businesses. So there are lots of different kinds of e-commerce. What do you have a favorite one, Jay? Do you have one you like the most of those four?
I mean, business to consumers is probably my favorite because the
Of
volumes are
course.
so much higher.
There's so much volume. Yeah.
You know,
And it's the ones that we use, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the ones that you think about the most frequently when you think about e-commerce. When we're talking to people, we're mostly talking to business to consumer. Like we're talking about ROAS, we're talking about ad spend, we're talking about all of that stuff. That kind of stuff is targeted to the B2C type entity, because that's what you're trying to do. You're using social media to identify your funnel and parts it down in an appropriate way.
But like platforms like Shopify now and BigCommerce, they have wholesale. It's the same platform, but they're not selling it as wholesale. And they have specific departments that help you generate a wholesale business. Yeah. So it helps you on the B2B side. And you know, you're going to sell much more as far as volume on less orders. And, you know, it helps. I mean, you're going to sell more product and have more turns in your inventory. It might be at a lower value, but you know, you weigh that out with the traditional, you know, consumer orders of 1-2 items versus, you know, pallets. You know, that profit might equalize at some point in how you're looking at that. So
almost certainly, for sure. And so I think about that too. Like B2C is what I think of when I think of e-commerce, but there's other kinds too. And so next we wanted to talk about some of the benefits of e-commerce. I think we've talked several times about my favorite benefit to e-commerce, and that's the ability to reach a global customer base. Anybody can go to the internet. Well, that's maybe unfair. A whole lot of people can go to the internet. A lot of the world has the capacity to get on the internet, to go find your site, to buy whatever it is, right? Brownbeer.com or whatever it is, right? Like your niche, you can find it, you can identify it, and people across the world can get it. And when you're trying to sell from a retail location, a physical location, you just do not have that reach. It's just not the same. And so that's one of the biggest advantages of e-commerce, is that you broaden your customer pool exponentially. The other thing is that you have lower overhead costs. Like this is a huge value too. And when you think about brick and mortar, when you think about that, a retail shop, like you have to pay rent. You have to like keep inventory there in the shop. You have to make sure somebody's there monitoring the shop. Like you have to have people there, and so you have the electricity bill. You have like all these things that go along with running a physical presence business. That with an e-commerce business you just don't. Like you don't have to. You do have those things, but they're in a much different capacity, right? Because your inventory is now held in a warehouse. Which, if you're selling enough volume through your little brick and mortar store, you're going to have that same thing, right? Mm-hmm. So your brick and mortar store becomes an additive cost, like an additional cost, versus e-commerce.
And the rents today have started climbing at a rate higher than the inflation rate has.
What's that has?
The rents for these retail locations. And I mean, right here by my home, we've had a like championship winning restaurant has now closed because rent was too high, and the UPS store has closed.
Well, that seems like a thing that would never even happen.
You would think that would never go out of business.
You would think that.
Right.
I wonder if that's a modeling thing, because I am interested. I'm curious about that. Our local UPS store has right on there, locally owned by one of the members of your community. So I wonder if there's low enough volume that they really do run into kind of other kinds of trouble. I don't know exactly how that model works, but it's crazy to imagine that even that kind of business has gone out of business.
And it's really crazy to hear that, you know, yes, that this restaurant had a sweetheart deal on rent, mm-hmm. and when that lease expired, they increased it to such a rate that there's no way they could have survived there. And This restaurant was a huge favorite in the area, and it left a huge void. And it's like, okay, I have the rents started exceeding what should be normal.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. It is probably doesn't fit great in a conversation about starting an e-commerce business, but it is a wonderful question. But it does also point out that especially if you're trying to sell stuff, like
it's a driver to go e-commerce rather than retail.
It's a seller.
Sure.
You can't do that as effectively, right, with a restaurant. But if you're a little marketplace or something like that, a little shop, like it can be way more valuable for sure. I know where Kayla and I used to live in the downtown Dallas area. There was one of the local areas, Deep Ellum, was filled with little shops and retail shops in along the street, right? So you could go and you could have dinner and you could just walk in and peruse through the little shops.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of them had that same problem where their rent started to increase and all of a sudden that wasn't it didn't make sense for them anymore. So we saw so much turnover in those types of stores in that area that it was really disappointing. But having that ability to be able to sell virtually can really go a long way, and it's truly one of the very clear benefits of e-commerce. Another, and to that same point, really, is the ability to scale and to remain flexible, right? Like that's much easier in an e-commerce environment. Your store can only hold so much inventory, and you have to get it there and get it out of there and all of those types of things. But your warehouse can hold a significant amount of inventory, which allows you to have the ability to scale much easier because you don't have a rack with 4 slots or a shelf with space enough for 10 cans or something, right? You have so much more flexibility and scalability because you can stock up on the things that sell really well and stock down on the things that don't, and so it does give you a lot more flexibility with how you run your business and how you want to run your business. And so that's a huge benefit, I think, to e-commerce. And then one that's probably not really thought about a lot, but that I think is extremely valuable, especially as you think about scaling the business or running your business, is the access to your customer data and insights around your customer data.
Mm-hmm.
When someone comes into your shop and buys something with cash, you don't know anything about them. They walk out the door with your product, and that may be the last you ever see of them. But when you buy from brownbeer.com, now brownbeer.com has your email address. They know when you bought. They know when you buy the next time. They know how frequently you're going to buy, and it helps you to be able to do it. They know what you bought last time, what you bought this time, and what kinds of things may appeal to you. You can start to build a profile of the customer that you're looking at, and being able to do that allows you to be much more targeted with your ad spend, because you can say, "Hey, I noticed that you buy brown beer every 6 weeks. Maybe it's been 5 weeks. You ready to buy some more?" And give yourself this opportunity to stimulate that extra volume, and also to be like, hey, a lot of people like yourself who like this particular kind of brown beer, like this one that's a little bit more brown. Would you like to try that one this time? And it gives you this opportunity, right, to sell a different product or to upsell your customers. And then you can also gain information about kind of the complexion of that customer, like how much liquid capital what other kinds of things do you learn about them, right? You can learn so much stuff about them that it gives you a significant opportunity to be able to target them effectively. What other things do you think about that, Jay?
Well, in addition to having the email address, they can take that email address and figure out all your social media handles and find out where you are, where you hang out, what you do. So, let's say they're trying to target accountants during tax season. They know from that data because, if they're doing it right, they're pulling that data from their sales system, probably putting it into a CRM or some other data system, combining it with the social data, combining it with all the other data that is out there on you, and they're going to know everything about you. They're going to know your age, you're male or female. They're going to know what you do, how many children you have, what you like on Facebook, what you like on Instagram. Yeah. How many G-Wagons you've purchased in the last 5 years.
That's right.
Things like that.
Yep. Oh, yeah, there's no question. I cannot tell you the amount of ads that I've gotten for like little girl stuff because of my daughter, right? Like, check out these cool outfits from this website. And then before I had my daughter, like, you don't even have to purchase anything sometimes for some of those ads to populate, but I wear a lot of Viore, and so I get loads and loads and loads and loads and loads. They like one every day from Viore about something or another. But what I realized is that then like competitors started to identify that data, right? Like they started to know who I was and how frequent of a customer I was there, and so if I'm looking at Facebook, I get, hey, have you tried these super soft joggers from XYZ entity, right? Because I clicked through the Viore ad once or whatever, right? So there's so much information, and then I don't know that I've necessarily bought any of those, but I've definitely gone and looked at their web pages, and I've definitely like really considered it, and I've gone to like a retail shop and touched it if I could. Right? Yeah. Is this a thing, right? Like that advertising is really effective. And so being able to get that information about your clients is huge.
You mentioned that yesterday. I was on a Teams call with one of our teammates discussing a product. Not 10 minutes later, showed up in an ad on social media for me.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it. They're listening.
And I did not click through.
No.
Because, it's one of those brands we mentioned earlier that I don't like.
Pepsi?
There you go.
Now, while there are loads and loads of valuable things that come along with starting an e-commerce business, like low overhead and like that ability to be flexible and scale quickly, there are also potential challenges. The biggest one of these, I think, is probably like building brand awareness, right? If you're a new company and a new startup, you're selling brown beer, you have to compete with 903, who already has a can, who already has a market share, who's already in retail shops. You have to compete with Manhattan Project because they're already there. Like those places already exist, and so that can be difficult to do because no one's tried your brown beer from brownbeer.com, right? No one knows whether or not to trust you or not. And so it can be really difficult to start, right? To build your brand, to do that. Another thing that can be complicated is the logistics, right? And fulfillment, right? Because those types of things, and especially for brownbeer.com, the logistics and complexities that come along with selling alcohol in Texas are substantial. And so if you don't have a good understanding of all of those things, you're going to have to do a lot of groundwork and a lot of legwork, or find a good partner to do that for you and to assist you in that. And sure, like when you started your project on Etsy, right, and you were making your handcrafted art, you could sell it, you could send it from your house, right? But now that you're now machining it and you're selling 10,000 of them a week. Like that has now become much more complicated than just selling it out of your garage. And so number one, understanding how you get those things to your customers, and then number two, understanding how you get those things from your providers, and especially in a situation where you're your own provider. Those logistics and fulfillment complexities are a barrier to entry, right? They're a challenge.
They can be, and there are various methods of going about that. So, when you're starting out, it might not be worth having a warehouse to do your own distribution. You want to go through a 3PL or third-party logistics warehouse because you don't have the expertise in warehouse operations or in fulfillment. So it's best to go and work with somebody that knows how to do it. The same
Right.
thing with manufacturing. You talked about 10,000 cans of beer.
Units. Yeah.
Yeah, or 10,000 cases, whatever it happens to be.
Sure.
If you're starting out of your home, it's going to take you a year to can 10,000 units.
So
So,
much.
you work with a contract manufacturer that can actually do it at scale and give you the pricing to do it at scale.
That's right.
Yes, you have to have extra capital to do that, but you're getting it done so you can actually sell it and bring that cash in. Because what's the most important thing of running an e-commerce business? Cash flow.
Cash flow. And one other problem, and it kind of goes together with brand awareness, is market competition and market saturation. Like there's lots and lots of brown beers out there, and so if yours isn't distinct and special and like actually good quality, you're gonna have a significant challenge, and that may be the case for a lot of different products. And so understanding and being able to define your product in the way that allows you to highlight what makes you special, what makes you unique, is really critical in your longer term success. One other thing that's again, it's the gigantic issue that people don't always think about that much, but in an e-commerce business, this is a challenge you run into, and that is cybersecurity. And of course then data privacy, right? So all of that stuff that we just talked about sharing data, about giving information away, about finding all of this information from customers. You get a lot of information from your customers. You get their credit card numbers, you get their address, you get their email address, you get a lot of information, and it is extremely important for both your customer and for you as a business to keep that information safe. And so cybersecurity can make e-commerce businesses at significant risk. And so it's really important that number one, you understand that. And then number two, that you understand how you can address that. And I think it's the same thing that we just talked about, right? Is you don't have to bring in an IT guy that's a full-time person, but you can find somebody who's going to be skilled in that space and be able to assist you or some partner like again, I think Shopify has pretty good guardrails around their data security. So it may be very easy to identify how you can help this.
And my recommendation is use a platform that that is trusted worldwide,
right?
And password, and multi-factor authentication. Because that is where things go downhill. Passwords get breached, people gain access, and next thing you know, you're United Healthcare and you've lost thousands of pieces of data that are identifiable to human beings and identities. So,
Yeah. Cybersecurity, big deal. Make sure you're thinking about that. What other challenges are there, Jay? We're like high level. I mean, I'm sure there's loads and loads of challenges.
We haven't even gotten into the financial aspects, and we're going to do that. We're going to have a whole, maybe 2 or 3 sessions on financing and financials and all that business side. But
right, sure.
From somebody that did it, I was in a business that was a B2C, a B2B provider. And the biggest thing for us was cash flow, because we were a manufacturer. We had to have the cash flow to keep our employees on the line every day, and then we needed the cash flow to buy the raw materials to make our product, and we needed the cash flow to buy more equipment to make the products that we were buying so that we could sell them and pay the individuals that were working for us. So cash flow is, like I said earlier, you want to bring in that cash so you can pay your bills and pay yourself and live on that. And that is the number one concern. And, going back to, and this is all related to cash flow, going back to what you were talking about market saturation and differentiation. You might be able to develop a brown beer with a distinct flavor that would be a market differentiator, but you might just have developed the greatest tasting brown beer, but it's going to compare directly to 903 or Black Hole Sun. Maybe you name it Soundgarden or something like that. but but how are you going to differentiate it? And that might come down to you're gonna have to cut the price, which means you might be selling it at cost, which means you have to have cash flow to pay for the ads to sell that product at the deep discounts that you're trying to do to enter these markets. So there's so much that you have to look at when you're going through it.
And so speaking to that, there are a variety of steps we wanted to touch on today of things that you should consider. And that one that you're talking about is ideation, market research, right? Understand what your product is. Understand how your product fits into the market space. Understand like what who's going to buy it, right? Like who's going to be out there who wants your crap brown beer. The next thing, another key step is then developing a business plan. So understand all of those aspects of your upcoming business of how you're going to source your hops or your barley, how you're going to make this product, how you're going to fulfill the product. You need to have a full understanding of exactly what you're going to do, because if you haven't done that, then you're not going to have success.
I think the important thing of having that business plan is you're going to put all these things down on paper so you can track it and measure it. But I think the most important part of that is identifying what you don't know. Because the worst part of running a business is going into it and not knowing what you don't know, because that is what gets you every time. And by identifying this and working, there are people and organizations that work with people to develop these business plans. Let's say like a small business development center. So they've been through it and they will help identify what you don't know so you can address it.
Absolutely. So find good partners, and I think that's gonna come back up through the different steps that we talk about here, because the next step that you need to consider is choosing a business structure. And registering the business, and those two things not everyone is qualified to do, and so it is really important that you find a good partner who can give you good advice related to how should you structure this business. Does it make sense for you to be an S corp? Probably not, but it might, and so it's something that you need to have a conversation about. And then registering your business becomes critical, especially if you're going to be selling product across the United States or across the world. It becomes really important to understand, number one, like where your business is centrally located and understanding why. Like if you want to be a Delaware corporation, that's fine, but you need to understand why that's what you want to do. And then you need to know where your product's going to sell because of that, right? Because you're going to need to register in those states, because you may have sales tax exposure there. You may build excess there, so that you have to do state-related filings in those different states. And so it's really important that you find a good partner to help you to understand the exposure of what this means for you, and where you should be registered. The next thing that can be extremely important, and there's absolutely no question that this is probably one of the most important things around a business, is securing funding. Or also like managing your finances, right? So you need to find an accounting partner. You need to have somebody who's going to be able to tell you, actually, you can't spend that because you don't have that money. And you also want to be able to secure this funding, right? Because you need to know, is this money that's coming out of my pocket to be able to like buy all this inventory in advance, or do I have a community bank locally that I can build a line of credit with, or what other options do I have? Like being able to explore that is really important. And you want to be able to do that before you get started, because if you've already gotten started, you may be on the hook for all of that yourself, and need to come up with that funding to be able to pay your suppliers. Obviously, if you're running an e-commerce business, there's a very, very critical piece that goes along with that, and that's having a website. So you need a platform, right? You need a place where people can go to buy your product. And so those don't just grow on trees, although they these days I think they are relatively, like, in comparison to what they were back when you were building your ASP one, Jay. I'm sure they're a lot easier to do now, but they but they're not nothing, and you need it to work and you need it to function well. And especially if you've had a successful like starting of your business, right? You have 4 or 5 different products, you have different sizes of things. Like you're going to need that website to be able to highlight those things in a way that's appropriate. Um, and so you need to make sure that you either again, you can build it yourself. That's definitely an option, or you can find a good partner that can help you to build that platform so that your customers, your brownbeer.com customers, can come to brownbeer.com and not to nowhere. That website is really important. In conjunction with some of the things that we've already talked about, right? It's obviously becomes extremely important to be able to both source and manage your inventory. So you need to be able to buy your different components and understand how they're put together, right? Manufacture them if that's what you need to do. And then you need to find a good partner. Be that if you're so large that you're able to warehouse by yourself, that's great. But that means you need a warehousing facility. And if you're not, that means you need to maybe find a 3PL that can help you and can assist you in getting your product to your customers, especially as you continue to grow, because I can imagine how difficult that could be from trying to do it from your second bedroom. What a mess. So finding a good inventory management system, and also a partner that can help you to make sure that fulfillment is happening is extremely important. And then on a going forward basis, it also becomes extremely important to understand your marketing and your customer acquisition strategy. Because sure, some people are going to just Google brownbeer.com or just go to brownbeer.com, which I guess is kind of weird. I guess people did that before Google, right? You just typed it in. Yeah. I don't even really know. I don't know what people did before, but if they don't, if they've never heard of it, right? If you've never talked to, if it's only your friends who are buying from brownbeer.com, that's not much of a volume. You need some more people to get there. And so if you want people who Google brownbeer.com to actually get to brownbeer.com and not 903, you're going to have to pay a little bit of money probably. You may have to do some ad spend there on Google to be able to make sure that brownbeer.com is the first one that comes up. You need to understand what types of marketing and customer acquisition strategies even exist. And then, of course, how you want to obtain your customers, and so doing all of that can be extremely important. I mean, it is extremely important. There's no question about it, because it is how you are able to scale your business. And so knowing kind of all of the data that we talked about before, from that should come out of your ideation and market research, right? Like understanding who you're targeting and how you're targeting them are very important things that go together. Jay, what other key steps are there in starting up an e-commerce business?
I would say having your champion, that person that you can count on to, get the job done. A lot of times these are one, two people businesses, maybe husband, wife, but you gotta have that one person, and it might be your spouse, that's going to be there for you. Maybe they're the one that are doing the customer service and they're answering emails while you're doing product development. You need that person, and it might be an employee, it might be like I said, your spouse, but either way you got to have that champion. What else?
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I was listening to a podcast over the weekend on our drive back from Galveston. And my wife and I like to listen to revisionist history, and one of the revisionist history episodes was around a board game, the farming game, and the farming game. The guy who created the farming game was exactly like what we're talking about. This was pre-e-commerce, so it was very much not e-commerce, but it was the conceptually very similar. They took orders from their house, and they fulfilled their board game from their house. And so those people who were answering the phones every day were him and his wife and his kids. And so those people may very well be the people who are helping you with that information and being the champions of your product. In this case, he was the champion of his product. He went and sold it. Put it in the back of a station wagon or whatever, and drove around the Washington area. That's where he was. Selling it right out of the back of a van or the station wagon or whatever it was. And so that is extremely important. Absolutely. Yeah. What else, Jay? Any other
Um,
uh, things to think about?
well, when you're doing your ideation and product development, you have to,
Yeah.
you want to make the best product you can, but you also have to understand the cost of making that product.
Yeah, that's
So,
critical.
yeah, when you're doing that, so back in the day when we were making protein powders, we would have
Yeah.
3 or 4 different proteins at different value, different price lines, and different. Um, I don't want to call it strengths, but potency maybe. And
Sure.
you'd make, you'd work off a formula because you want it to be X, no, X grams of protein in a scoop or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. Of
So
course.
it comes down to volume, and in some cases, you're building a product that needs 2 scoops per serving,
Mm,
yet it's cheaper. But then when you look at it overall, you're actually spending twice as much for it because you're having to use twice as much.
right.
And in order to get the end usage out of it, it was not appropriate. So at some points, it's better to use the more expensive product because it goes farther.
Yeah.
Because having 2 scoops, you wanted it to have the same number of servings in the jar, and instead of
Yep.
having a 1 pound jar, you had a 2.5 pound jar. So you were paying
Mm,
twice as much, or possibly 3 times as much, for the container. So you
yeah.
got to look at all the different components when you're doing it, and it comes down to just more than taste profile.
Right. And it's the same. That reminds me very much of this same board game podcast, because it was the same idea. Like, I didn't know this, but apparently there's only like 1 or 2 people in the world that make the like hard back of a board game
Really?
board. And apparently they're well, maybe this is in the 70s, so maybe it's more now. But at the
Right.
time, like there's one, right, and that guy is in California, and so that means you had to get your board from the board guy in California. You had to get your dice from the dice guy in New Hampshire. You had to get your paper money from the paper money guy in Rhode Island. And so it's just like you have to identify, like, this is an important part, like you're saying, of
Right.
your ideation and your market research, is like you need to know where you're going to source these products, and you need to understand, like, wait, can I only get that thing from this one guy, or do I have some other options? Or if I really want to build up my quality, like you're talking about, Jay, like, do I need to step up, and does that give me different flexibility, or does that
Mm-hmm.
narrow my flexibility? Because that can be significant to you. There are some other things too that you want to like think about when it comes to like your market research too. You want to make sure you understand like really well your niche, and your products if you have several, right? Like if you're intending to, if you've already like created a couple prototypes or something like that, you maybe have some successful products. Like, what other products are you going to have? What other products does your product portfolio need? Like, being thoughtful of that is really important. One of the things that goes along with that too is like competitor research, right? Like, what do they sell? How much do they sell it for? Are you going to be able to source it for a price that makes sense? Like can you, are you going to be able to be profitable? Like, what's your potential profitability? Like, if you're sourcing it for a different cost, then but you can only sell it for so much because your competitor, who's already like a little bit better than you in the market,
Mm-hmm.
are well known. Like, you can only be so far off their cost, or like there's kind of your max, right? Like, you have to be able to evaluate that.
Most
And
definitely.
so like doing that is extremely important, and also understanding the people that you're using now, right? Like the customers you already have, like being really responsive to their feedback. Like, what improvements do you need to make to your product to make it better? Does everybody say that your t-shirt runs a size too small, or is a little short in the sleeve or something like that? Like, maybe let's make some edits to it before we scale it, right? So that you can market it properly. And so there are lots of things to think about, especially as you're in the beginning stages, and I think that can go a long way. Jay, are there other thoughts that you have on this kind of like startup idea of your e-commerce business just getting started? Any other points that you think we should talk about today?
I think we covered everything that I was thinking of.
That's awesome.
Did a pretty
Me
exhaustive
too.
list there.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty good one, right?
Yeah.
That was well
Yeah.
well documented. We talked about a lot of things today. We talked about We talked about why you might want to do e-commerce, what e-commerce is, what the different kinds of e-commerce are. We talked about what some of the challenges related to e-commerce are. We ran through a variety of different key steps to think about and to be thinking of and to find people to partner with, probably related to starting up your e-commerce business. So yeah, I think that's a great start to this series on what to do when you get started and how to really kick up your business. So before we leave, what's going on this week, Jay? Or next week? This weekend?
Well, this weekend for me, wife's got a friend in town, and they're going to a concert tomorrow evening. Earlier this week, what was that?
Who's she seeing?
Indigo Girls?
Great, sure. Whoever that is. Sounds like a band.
Yeah. I think that's who they're going to say, but yeah. But, like I said last week at this time, we're in this dry spell here in Florida before summer kicks in, although we've had some sprinkles the last 2 days. But I took the top off the Jeep and...
Just in time to get sprinkled on?
And no, we've been fine with that, but right now I got my doors piled up in front of it, and it's like I'm really fearful that if my wife or Abby drive it, they might hit one of those doors with the bumper or something. So Tuesday night
from the garage.
Yeah. So Tuesday night, I hit up on a website and found some hangers for the doors. E-commerce, exactly. So I will be installing them on my garage wall, doing a little bit of
GarageDoorHangers.com.
And I don't know what it was, but probably JeepAccessoriesSomething.com. But,
sure, of course.
So going to get that done, and other than that,
It's pizza weekend, Jay?
No, I don't have any dough.
Dough.
Last Friday was right after this. We made some pizzas, and then we did it again on Tuesday. Don't usually do it that close, but it was so good.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
This weekend, I didn't even think about this. I hadn't thought about it until basically Wednesday when I went bowling. I'm bowling in a bowling tournament this weekend.
Nice.
And the North Texas Open, USBC sponsored Open is here in North Texas. This I think it runs for 3 weekends.
Will we see this on ESPN?
No, hell no. Get out of here.
On the Ocho?
On what?
The Ocho, ESPN 8.
We're talking more like the Dete Ocho here. We're
yeah.
Deep into the ESPNs where you find the North Texas USBC Open or whatever.
Yeah.
But it runs for 3 weekends, and one of my bowling teammates was like, "We should do this." He's been wanting to bowl in tournaments. He and I had gone to a few, like several years ago now, and always have a great time. And so he thought it would be a fun idea for the guys on our team too. There are 4 guys on our team. He thought it would be a fun idea for us to go bowl in a bowling tournament. And so we're doing that this weekend. It's down in Grand Prairie. I'm pretty stoked for it. This will be my first time in a really long time bowling in a tournament, and I have been. That's me knocking on wood. I have been bowling really well on Wednesdays, so I am hopeful to carry that forward into this tournament to see if we can have mad success. So I'm really looking forward to that. But what's happening next week? Anything expected? Are we expecting any kind of news or anything? Any excitement?
We shall see. I do not know. I cannot see anything in the crystal ball at this point. But
well, too bad.
Yeah.
Maybe next week. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you, Jay, for talking to me about e-commerce businesses.
Sure.
Jesus, talking to me about e-commerce businesses today. I always love chatting with you about all kinds of different things. Thank you to those people that are out there watching right now, all two of you, and then thank you also to the people who watch us in the future.
Yeah,
It is always a
subscribe,
joy.
please.
Yeah,
And know when we will
subscribe,
be
hit the
live.
button, click the bell. Make sure that you know when we go
Yes.
live 3:40 Central Time every Friday, assuming that we're going to be here, which isn't always the case, but but it is today, and it will be next week, and it will be for the next couple weeks, I think. So thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye.